Thank you. Good morning. And Superintendent Davis, thank you for that more than generous introduction. You know, before I get started, I just want to say I attend lots of meetings and I attend lots of conferences, but this is a moment to remember, brother. There is a certain energy, and by the way, it's something that we carry with us. And sometimes, and you all know what that means, sometimes we can just communicate it by just a glance, right? You know, and you also know the power of the glance by not getting it. And it was just amazing to me that as I came in, everywhere I looked, I either got a glance or a nod. So that says something about the energy in this room, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here with you. But to the brother, Dr. McKeezy, let me just say this. I just want to salute you and tell you how much you mean to me personally for doing the work that you do. And if you ever had a thought about what one person can do, right? Because we're in a tough business. And sometimes you have a lot of things in your head and you keep saying, well, can I do it? You've got to take a leap of faith. And so I just want to salute this brother for taking a leap of faith to bring us all together today on this most important topic. So thank you, brother. So if you don't mind, you know, I had a choice. I was raised, some of you may know, I was raised in a family of musicians. And it's interesting because my father, when I was growing up, he would always talk about how hard it was to be a musician in America, to be a black musician in America. And you know, as a child, I didn't get it because this was a man who played with all of my heroes, right? So all of the songs, for example, that you hear by Billie Holiday, you'll hear a saxophonist playing behind him. That was my father. And I said to myself, why doesn't he want me to do this? And he continued to say to me, no, I want you to get an education and to do something with your life, making something out of your life. And now that I'm older and I own it, you know, I'm an elder. I think back on a lot of the things that he told me growing up. And I'm going to say something that may sound a little funny, but, you know, because he was a musician, he spoke a different language. And so I find myself slipping into some of that language every now and then now that I'm older. So if I slip, it's not that I'm just trying to be cool. It is an honest slip. But more to the serious side of the things, the work that you all are involved in is what I would call, right now, we're in a war. And if nobody told you, we are in a real war for the minds of our young people. And you got to understand, and you know, we're in New York, and you know, there are a lot of people that think because we're in New York and you think everything goes, that some of the things that you hear about in Texas and in Florida are not happening here. But let me tell you, there are places in New York like the North Country and Long Island where they can't wait to take control. And so we are the only thing that stand between that, right? Because we're the ones who interact with our young people. And so the work that you do is critically important in that war, what I would describe for the minds of our young people. And if you allow me, because this is serious work, I have some notes that I'd like to refer to as I talk to you today. Can I use this? Well, you can hear me. So we are right now in what I would describe as an incredible moral moment. This is a moral moment we're in. And what we do now, the decisions we make, the actions we take, what we deem essential, but most important, whom, and I would underscore, whom we deem necessary will impact generations to come. Because if you understand the foundation of public education in America, it was built on a very simple principle. And it goes like this. It says that a nation that expects to be free and ignorant expects the impossible. Right? So what is that saying? It's saying that you can't be free and ignorant. But here's the challenge. When that statement was made, 90% of the children in the place where the statement was made in Virginia, 90% of them were enslaved Africans. And so you have to understand that the very foundation of the institution that we work in, from its inception, was never designed for all of us. Now, I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. And so it's been left to every generation to realize the vision of what it means to have a universal public education. And so now when you're invited to a place where they talk about transformational leadership, see, now this is your time. This is your moment. And each of you should be asking yourself two questions. The first question is, what am I going to do on Monday with what I learned on Friday and Saturday? Right? Because this is not just entertainment. Right? You should be thinking, is there something that I heard that I can go back on Monday and use? Because if you don't take anything back with you, then essentially all this is an experience. It's an event. And so our young people need you to really think about that. The other important point is what will be your role as a leader. And whether you are a principal or you're not a principal, if you're working with our young people, you are a leader. Right? So, I don't want to get confused about titles. And I know titles are important. And I know lots of people, their chest gets puffed when they get the title. But here's the problem. There are a lot of very smart people with titles. And you have to ask yourself, well, why do we still have the results that we have? So, and I'm serious, I believe that in self-initiated public advancement, I believe that we should pursue higher degrees, but we have more people of African descent with calling themselves doctor. In the state of New York, I looked at the list. We have more people calling them doctor than ever before. And yet, when we line up the results and outcomes for young people in New York State, it is the very people who look like those doctors who are at the bottom. And you've got to ask yourself, well, what are we doing with all that supposed brilliance? And so, again, if you take anything from the conference, it should be that we have a responsibility to make a difference. And if you're in this business and you're not willing to step up and make a difference, then you're in the wrong place. Now, making a difference doesn't mean that you will always be recognized for it. And you know, I looked at the list of your presenters, and there are some presenters who know exactly what I'm talking about. Because the other thing that transformational leadership requires is a very simple thing that one of my mentors told me once. He said, you know, Lester, understand something. If you're not willing to go, don't take this job. Right? And what he was saying is there's going to come a time in this job where your very values of who you are as a man, as a person, what you say you believe in will be tested. And if you're not ready to go, you can't stay. So understand that leadership, while it's enjoyable and it's important, it requires courage. Transformational leadership is also important because I believe it provides a framework for the what, for the why, and the how of our work. And so, as Dennis was talking, and he was talking about the prevailing narrative, and you know, there is a prevailing narrative that I hear constantly, and it goes something like this. Well, you know, these poor kids, how many of us grew up poor? I know you're shy, but that's right. But you're here. And think about what they're saying. They say, well, you know, these poor kids, they've had 3 years of trauma. And they said, well, you know, well, so they've had 3 years of trauma. They say, well, you know, Dr. Young, how do you expect us to get them ready? And this is what they revert back to. They say, well, you know, you all just want them to take the test and pass the test and on and on and on. And I will tell you this. Look, let's be candid here. Results matter. You know, results matter. But I'm not silly. I understand that numbers don't tell the whole story, right? And so we've got to be careful. While we have to understand that results matter, results are not the only thing. That there are a lot of people that got very high scores and are doing horrible things. And so it is also what you're like, right? What you're like as a person determines what you do with what you know. And that's why we need each of you to be the role models, the very role models for the people who preceded you in our field. Because that's what they held up as a goal and a target. So, what do we know about learning? The first thing that we have to understand is that we now know more about how young people learn, grow, and develop than we've ever known in the history of the planet. We know how all children learn, grow, and develop. But here's the challenge. What do we do with that knowledge? For example, we now know that what happens 0 to 3 can change the entire trajectory of a young person's life. But how are you as public school educators? I mean, and you can't tell me, well, you know, Doc, I'm not responsible for 0 to 3. But here's what you know. I just told you some of the most important years of a young person's existence. That groundwork, that framework is built 0 to 3, from birth to age 3. So it's incumbent upon leaders to figure out how you're going to work with the community, how you're going to work with families to ensure that everyone understands what they need to do so that when young people get to you, you can do what you're supposed to do. So we now know more than we've ever known. We also know that, contrary to what a lot of people tell you, cognitive development is not the only thing that matters. Because cognitive development is connected to all of the other developmental pathways. What am I saying? Cognitive development is connected to linguistic development. It's connected to physical development. It's connected to emotional development. It's connected to psychological development. In fact, the developmental pathways are inextricably connected. So if in your institution you're only focused on the cognitive development, see, you're making a mistake. You have to, and here's what we know. So if I'm saying something that you can use, see, the real question is, on Monday, what are you doing that really supports what we know about how all children learn, grow, and develop? The other point that I would make that I think is critical that we often don't hear anything about is that there's something called non-cognitive variables. And it's very interesting. There's a research study, and of all people, it was supported by Bill Gates. And Bill Gates wanted to understand, he did a landscape survey of American colleges and universities. And he wanted to know, where are the places where black and brown young people are doing well? And what he defined as doing well is something very simple. He said graduating from college in 4 years, not taking the scenic route. So what was the difference between black and brown young people who graduated in 4 years and the ones who did not? And here's what they found. They found that when black and brown young people had a heightened sense of self-esteem and self-concept, in other words, they knew who they were and they felt good about who they were, that translated into a certain power that they had internally. Now, I'm not finished. Self-esteem and self-concept. They found that when black and brown young people knew how to conduct a realistic self-appraisal, and excuse me if you didn't think I was going to be instructive today. A realistic self-appraisal. What do I mean? It means very simply, when you see your 9th graders or your 6th graders, you ask them a very simple question. What are you good at? And they will give you an answer. And then you ask them why. And usually they just blank out. Now ask them what they're not good at. And they will tell you any number of things. I'm not good at math because I've never been good at math. Or sometimes if the parent overhears you talking to him, they say, well, he's not good at math because I wasn't good at math. But you all have heard that, and as if it's all right. But the most important point of this is not that I'm trying to make jokes, is that when a young person can conduct a realistic self-appraisal, when a youngster can look at their performance and talk to you about what they're good at, what they're not good at, talk about why they're good at it, and what they're going to do about the things that they're not good at, those young people are more successful in college. When young people have a preference for long-term goals versus short-term goals. See, when young people instinctively know how to defer gratification, they do better. Now, why am I talking about these things? See, these are things that you can teach. These are things that young people can develop just by being around you. Preference for long-term goals. The next, every young person needs a strong support person outside of the family. Talk to some of our high school young people and you ask them, I ask them all every day, who do you go to when you have a problem? Who's your go-to person? And usually what I get is they'll give me a title. And I say, no, give me a name. Understand something. Every young person in your building, you see, your youngsters need to know that there is a person in this building that they can go to when they're up against the wall. In fact, I had the experience recently of asking some young people. I said, well, why were you so successful here? And the first thing they said to me was, we're like a family here. Now think about what she was saying to me. We're like a family. She said, if I have a problem, I have my teacher's number. Now you might say, oh, he's being ridiculous. But they are our family. Because one of the characteristics of a strong teacher during America's dark period, when we had what some historians refer to as the apartheid laws. I mean, you all do know that, right? During Jim Crow, there were laws. You couldn't go here, you couldn't go there, you couldn't be with this person. There were actual laws that said you couldn't get dressed up. So during that period of time, black educators understood that the students in their classroom were their children. And their job, in addition to teaching them, was to be their role models. So you have a heavy burden. Our young people need you. There are just a few others. Every young person needs to have a set of leadership experiences in our schools. When I watch the young people, I focused on the lead drummer. Did you watch him? He never said a word. Did you notice? He just did things. He moved, and they got it. Every young person under our charge, they need to have opportunities to experience leadership. And the other point that I'm going to make that they have to be able to develop some skills in other fields outside of the schooling process. You see, our ancestors understood that. Somehow we've gotten away from that. See, young people need to be able to demonstrate their brilliance in a variety of ways. Just coming to school and raising their hand and answering your questions and doing the homework isn't the only thing. And remember what I said, there are a lot of smart people who have done horrible things, treacherous things, will hurt you just for their own gain. And so in our business, and somebody talked about Brownsville, I will tell you that I was a principal in Ocean Hill, Brownsville. And this was back during the days of decentralization, when it was a whole different time in this city. And we had to get our arms around the young people, right? We had to really, literally put our arms around young people to give them what they needed. But we understood that when you could do that, when you do that, that there's nothing that these young people can't accomplish. And so it really doesn't matter that they were from Brownsville. So I'm going to move quickly because somebody's looking at me. But when I talked about the importance of early childhood, how many elementary people do we have here? All right, so here's just some quick data pieces that you need to know. That when our young people have access to a high quality, early learning and early childhood experience, it has produced increased math skills by as much as 21%. It increases pre-reading skills as much as 52%. It cuts special education placement by 43%. It increases high school graduation rate by 44%, and it increases median earnings by 36%. And that's just early learning and early childhood. And so just imagine if every young person, those of you in elementary school, had a high quality early learning and early childhood experience by the time they got to you. You see, because then you would hear a different conversation, because the conversation that we hear now from most of these kindergarten teachers, those kindergarten teachers, is that if they would just come to me better, they do better. All right, that's what they say. They say, well, why can't they come to school ready to learn? And so here's the question that I ask is, well, if they come to you and they're not ready to learn, what better place for them to learn than in your classroom, right? So part of what we've got to do, and it goes back to the earlier theme that I heard the founder talk about, is changing the narrative. We have to change the narrative. The other most important thing that I think in our business was really asked by someone that I considered to be the prince of our profession, Dr. Asa Hilliard. And he asked a very important question before he passed, and it goes like this. He said, can we place our children and youth in the care of well-prepared, wise educators who love them and who have the will and skill to teach them? You know, Asa Hilliard talked about this almost 50 years ago, that the most important thing we can do is to make sure we have the right people standing in front of our young people and leading our schools. The right people standing in front of our young people and leading our schools. He wasn't talking about alternative certification. He wasn't talking about fast tracking preparation. He was talking about making sure that the adults that are in our classrooms have the knowledge, the skills, and worldview that's needed to educate each and every one of our children. And seeing where he got that from, this is March, women, ladies, a very brilliant black woman by the name of Jacqueline Jordan Irvine, Dr. Jacqueline Jordan Irvine, many, many years ago, before Gloria Latson Billings, she said that we needed to make sure that we had people who displayed a high level of cultural synchronization. And I'm not going to be theoretical with you, but basically what she was saying is that our professionals have to be in sync with our children, right? So that means they have to know who they are and how they learn. So it's important that you know the pedagogy. It's important that you know all that stuff. But understand the most important skill that you bring to our business is knowing who the young people are and how they learn. And so we need to ask ourselves, in our schools, when you go back on Monday, what are those opportunities that you're providing to make sure everyone, and look, here's the woodshed conversation. Just because we may look like the children doesn't necessarily mean we're in sync. And so the question you got to ask is, And you know the truth, right? There were some people, when the music came on, you saw this. And then there were some people who were. So we've got work to do. Now, I'm going to keep to the time. But I just want to say something to you, because lots of people, I go around the schools and they tell me things like, oh, you don't know how hard we're having it, it's bad, the kids are off the hook, and they use all these kinds of strange expressions. And then they put it under the topic of trauma. And I'm going to say to you, as the Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents, I honestly think we're over pathologizing our children. I'm just going to say it. Now, here's what we know. See, you're never going to cure trauma, right? So we ought to stop talking about it like that. What we've got to do is help build resilience in all of our young people, so when they face these situations, because understand, children that look like you and I have been experiencing traumatic situations each and every day, right? And it's just amazing to me that now, so here's what I want to leave you with, just two things, quick things. A very important African-American scholar by the name of Dr. Vanessa Siddell Walker. She was so important that when I was a superintendent, I bought her book, gave it to every principal and assistant principal in District 13. It was actually, it was like our working book. And it was entitled Their Highest Potential. And what she was trying to figure out, she's a historian, educational historian, and what she was trying to figure out is that during that period of time that I talked about, during the traumatic period in American history where we had these laws, there were black children all over the segregated South who were being educated, right, with hardly no resources. And she was trying to figure out, well, how was it that was able to happen? And those graduates were able to go on and do amazing things. And when you think about the leaders of the movements of the 20th century, those people were educated in those very segregated schools. So who were those teachers? What were they doing? And so here's what she found. Four or five basic things. The first, there was strong teacher identification with the culture and beliefs that encompassed the black community. Right? There was an identification with the culture and the beliefs of the community. They identified with the community. They didn't look at the community as other people. Number two, there was active involvement with those communities to become more effective teachers and to serve as role models for their students. So they not only identified with the community, they were involved. Right? They weren't just rushing to get out. And there's this brother over here wrote a wonderful book that talks about what we do with our education. And so all too often you hear people say, well, you should use your education as a way out. Right? What these teachers were saying, you need to use your education as a way in. Right? That's a very different conversation. Number three, they had a commitment to professional ideals involving a strong ethic of caring for students and a dedication to teaching and giving young people everything they needed so that they could learn. Right? They were very much focused. There was no question. In fact, in her interviews, one of the teachers said something, I didn't give them a choice between passing and failing. That was never a choice. And some of you may even have said that. Or maybe you've heard it. Number four, they knew how to adapt the curriculum to meet the needs of their students, including making the prescribed curriculum more academically expansive. In other words, taking the curriculum and giving them more. Not just doing what it said on the paper. You see, because in learning, right, we should be trying to take young people from where they are and moving them forward. Right? We should be pushing them forward. Always pushing them forward. And 5, effectively using a variety of supports provided by the surrounding community, which means that not only did they identify, not only were they involved, but they actually went into the community and brought the community into the school. So I'm going to leave you with this. Asa Hilliard asked that question, but in his own brilliance, he answered the question, and I'm going to give you his answer. He said, we need educators and leaders who are oriented towards our destiny because they are rooted in a deep understanding of our culture and traditions. Educators who identify with and are part of us. Educators who see our children as their own. Those who love our children and who have the will and skill to teach them and will make whatever sacrifices are necessary to raise them up where they belong. Now is the time for real liberators to come forward. Thank you.
Come. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, give another round of applause for Dr. Lester Young. Listen, for those who don't understand what you have in front of you, in over almost 250 years of the New York State Board of Regents, there has never been an African-American chancellor. So I want you all to understand what stood before you today. This isn't something that we take lightly. And these are the opportunities for us to give the pioneers, the people who did this for us. It's time. All right, this is what we got to do, ladies and gentlemen. Come on over here. Come, listen. When Lays and I put jackets on people, we want y'all to understand that it means something. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to make some noise for the New York State Board of Regents Chancellor, Dr. Lester Young. Again, hold on, because I still don't think we made enough noise for the first ever New York State Chancellor of the Board of Regents, Dr. Lester Young. It's okay, you can still make noise for him. He deserves it, ladies and gentlemen.